As I crossed that intersection, the road began to dip down dramatically, growing steeper and steeper as Arcadia Avenue passed over T Street, then bottomed out at U Street, which was aptly named. If you stood in the intersection of U and Arcadia and looked back down R, then turned and looked the other direction up toward V and W and Alton, you would have the feeling that you were standing at the bottom of a giant letter U. And that was the course I would be sledding, starting at the peak of Alton Street, racing down Arcadia past W and V and bottoming out at U, my sled slowing to a stop well before I reached T. Or at least that was the plan. By the time I huffed and puffed my way up to Alton, the hill was alive with dozens of kids of all sizes and ages, from toddlers to fuzzy-chinned teens. The boy in me has to admit that there were even girls there, including Betty Sue Whipple, the heartthrob of every 12-year-old boy in the neighborhood, including me. She was holding court in her pink furry boots at the top of the hill, waving off every request by boys eager to double up with her on a sled. My first run was faster than I expected, forcing me to drag my feet to prevent jackknifing at the bottom. Everyone seemed to be having the same problem, so someone had the bright idea to build a ramp at the bottom of U Street, an incline cobbled together out of snow and tree limbs and broken-down apple crates, to help with the transition up toward T Street. It worked beautifully the first few runs, the sled speeding up the ramp and going airborne for 20 feet or more before landing smoothly on the incline from U to T. But then the course became too fast, too icy, the speed so great that kids and sleds flew separate ways when they hit the ramp. A few of the kids decided to call it a day and head on home. But most of us stayed, standing in small groups at the top of the hill, discussing how to deal with the speed of the course. I think it was Tony Benedetti who suggested we try doubling and tripling up on the sleds, either sitting or lying down, pancaking, as a way to reduce the speeds. Everyone thought that was a good idea except Betty Sue, who waggled a finger at us and said, "No, no, no." It didn't work. The course was still too fast. We should have just gone home. But then someone had the brilliant idea to use something other than a sled to go down the course. It was an idea that had come up before in previous snows as we stood at the corner of Alton and Arcadia, where Jake Lombardo lived, his yard filled with his father's junked cars, whole and in pieces. The abandoned hood of an old Hudson Hornet had caught our attention more than once. Most of us thought the idea was ridiculous. The long black hood looked more like an abandoned half-shell of a giant mussel than anything that could approximate a sled. But then Betty Sue said we could pretend it was Santa's sleigh, and she would be Mrs. Claus, and the rest of us could be elves. And so, in an act of hormone-induced insanity, we all dragged the sleigh to the starting line and climbed aboard. It started off slowly, as you might expect, but then the hood and the ice formed an alliance of headlong speed, and we found ourselves hurtling down the course faster than any sled could go, terror building in us, all of us screaming.